Sorry about that. Is that better? I'm still seeing stuff in the meter. And it worked in test. You tell me. Does it sound like there's more stuff here? Apologies for that. If there was an issue with that, which would be an embarrassing turn of events, indeed. I always test this stuff before I go live. Huh. Wacky. I wonder if I had a... Well, in any case, hello everybody. We started early, but I guess we didn't actually start early because weird microphone. Unless it cut out. Yeah, I mean, before I go live every stream, I do a little test recording thing, and it was working there. And I was seeing something in my meter, but... Well, in any case, hello Rory on a bike. Thanks for pointing that out. I could have gone an entire stream making absolutely no noise whatsoever. What was it that we were talking about? We were talking about my override audit package and functionality that we're currently working on creating for this thing. And it generally revolves around the idea that you can make patches to your packages, and we want to be able to actually share those with other people. But first, I was asked a question in my Discord, and it was related to us having a snippet that inserts the current date, which is not directly possible in Sublime Text 3 and might be possible in Sublime Text 4. I thought of a potential way that it could be done now in a way that it couldn't have been done previously. So the idea is, of course, that you create a snippet and you inject it out. And if you're unfamiliar with what snippets are in Sublime Text, but it would allow you to tab through different aspects of something and then leave the cursor in a particular place. You generally use it for stuff like, say you had some Python code and you wanted to create a class, then you could say my class name here. And then this is the base class. Let's say that's correct. This is the doc string for my class. Hit tab. Argument 1. That part's good. That part's good. We're actually ready to start implementing our class. And we can define a method that takes self like that. Or maybe you want to make it broken and not have one, for example. Examples of what you can do with snippets. And what this person was asking was, is it possible to create a snippet that allows you to insert the date as a part of the situation? And yeah, well, at least that part was working, so that's nice. This is what I get for starting early, I suppose. That might also explain why there were a bunch of people and then they ran away. Is this a good example of this? Let's say that this is an example of this. So what we would do is say we want to, well, let's close all these files for the time being, so just we have like an open area to work in here. And we say we want there to be a new snippet. It gives us the stub. We paste in this. It's going to only work in a LaTeX document, so we create a LaTeX document. Now, as soon as I save this, we call this my cool snippet. LaTeX doc snippet, for example. Name doesn't really matter. But what we're going to find is that if I go into here and type snippet, of all of the snippets that actually appear in here, my cool LaTeX doc snippet appears. And it even tells us that the key document followed by the tab key is what's going to actually expand it out, which is also available here. And what the person wants is today's date inserted in this thing automatically. We might do something like document, hit tab, there it is, title here, and then this is where the document actually goes. So they want that date actually inserted in there automatically. Now, there's a few ways that one could pull this off. As it says here, it's not directly possible to expand a snippet and have one of the fields dynamically update, except in certain situations, but we're going to investigate that in a moment. There's a package called insert date that allows you to insert stuff in. So that's a good way to get the date, but it doesn't necessarily do what you want. And basically it comes down to the fact that when the snippet expands, it knows you want this to be the date, say, but it can't dynamically insert it in there. That's sort of the issue with that. There's a couple of ways around that. One of those is using just a key, which is this one here. You can use a macro, which will insert the snippet, run the command, and then go. It requires you to make sure that the date is an appropriate item. One thing that I'm curious about that is now documented that might not have been back then. Sublime Text.io should take us to here where we can go to the user documentation, where I might actually go blind thanks to the brightness of that. Since the audio was a little corked earlier, I will reiterate now that if anybody that's watching has any questions about Sublime, anything I'm working on here, if you want to help setting up your Sublime, question about why it works the way that it doesn't, you want to know why it's cool, why I use it, any sort of that sort of thing, or advice on plugins, world's your oyster. Drop them in the chat. Don't worry about disrupting any scheduled thing, because what's scheduled here is hanging out with people in chat and answering questions while we work on stuff. We need to search inside of this thing. Made it make it a little bit smaller for snippets. That's going to give us the file format, and we can get selection, current line, current word, directory, file name, file path, file name, line index, line number, selected text, scope, soft text. So there's no built-in variable that will convert into a date. So the various ways that this can be accomplished always sort of revolve around a little bit of trickery, if you will. Let's go through these things in order. Expanding the snippet via the tab trigger, no extra plugin. You could expand the snippet with the tab trigger, but there's no way to invoke that. So what you'd have to do is use one of the keys that is part of the insert date command package, rather, to insert a date in. And you'd have to make sure that your snippet actually had the date as the appropriate field. Hello, David. Welcome. I guess I should probably install that package to make this a little bit easier, huh? What's it called? It's called insert date, right? So let's see. We'll just go ahead and install package. How are you doing? How's everybody's week going so far? My manager at work was off today because they were off last week and were supposed to be flying back tonight, but they got an inadvertent extra day of vacation because their flight got canceled. So now we sort of have an extra day of learning stuff tomorrow because he's not going to be back to start assigning tasks. It's kind of an interesting thing. Insert date. Let's install said package. So this inserts the current date and or time according to a specified format. You should set your time zone in order to properly use that package. Do you want to do that now? Sure. It's going to be Canada Pacific. Okay. Open the command palette and select. So one of the first things that you might be interesting to do with any particular package is to actually look it up in package control. So we click on something like that and say insert date. You can also get to this from Sublime by saying discover packages. It'll open up the package control website if you're not sure what the link is. There may or may not be extra documentation, but there's always a README that provides basic information. And there's your installation, and here's your usage. Push F5, select a date, and hit a thing. Or we can actually just invoke the command directly. So I guess what that means is if we wanted the date to be in here, You could probably push F5 twice. No? Oh, is that command not actually... Oh, you know what? I probably have that bound to something else. Insert date. Default. Boom. From what I have seen, Sublime Text is very popular among competitive programmers. I've noticed that too. People seem to ask a lot of questions about that sort of thing. I've been getting a lot of questions lately about the Fast Olympic coding package as well. From someone who I think is revamping it. I'm not sure if it was originally abandoned by its author or what. Oh, pardon me. Control F5, Control F5 inserts the default. F5 should show the panel, but it doesn't because I have that bound to something else that's default. So if I was to have... Whoops. What the hell? Hang on a second. There we go. Now we go Control F5, Control F5, and that expands out. So one thing that we could do in our little snippet here, the cursor goes in the order of the numbers. So what if this was this, for example, whoops, then when we do document, the first one is the title, the second one is the date, and then it jumps down to there, right? So again, if we were to do this, one way that we could actually invoke this is type my title, get to this part, hit the key, and away we go. That's a little bit janky, such as it is, right? If we were to swap the order of these two numbers, like so, then it's going to visit this in the order that they're numbered. So now when we invoke this, it ends up at the date first, which we can invoke. Then it'll go up to the title. And then it jumps down there, right? The purpose of making that particular change is that if the date is first, then we could make a macro that does that for us and then invoke the macro. And an example of that, we don't need to necessarily do that here. The first way to do this is you can expand it via the tab trigger. No extra plugin needed, but since there's no way to insert the date, you need to manually press the key. In this case, F5 or Control F5, Control F5. Once you get the date, hit tab, and that's not really what you wanted. This guy wants to do, but it'll work. The next way is, what if we made a macro? So we could make a macro with these particular commands in it. One to insert the snippet named this. It's different in my example here, but nevertheless. Then we can insert a date in a particular format and then go to the next field. And now when you bind this macro to a key, as soon as you hit it, it inserts the snippet. Because we set the order to make the snippet be at the date first, this is where the cursor is sitting. It'll immediately insert the date and then it'll jump to the appropriate place. That is a way to do it, but it doesn't let you do it via a tab completion like that. I should probably do that in the appropriate thing, huh? Yeah. We need the latex one again. In this one, it doesn't invoke that particular command. We'd have to invoke that command manually, essentially. Alternatively, you could create a Sublime Commands file to run the same thing, so you don't have to use a key binding to do it. You could trigger it from the command palette. Expanding the snippet via the tab trigger with an extra plugin. And this one's a little bit on the fun side, if you will. The idea is this. We have a command that assumes it's going to be invoked when the cursor is next to the word document. In fact, we could probably just throw this right in here and show you exactly what this thing is supposed to do. So let's take that. Let's say new plugin, paste that, and call this latex thing. Now there's a new command called new latex document. What this is going to do is it's going to assume the cursor is at the end of a line somewhere. And we're going to enforce that with the key binding that we're using. It's going to figure out the point that the first cursor is sitting at. It's going to grab the line up to that point and figure out the last word on it. Then it's going to remove that word out and trigger the thing here. I believe I missed a line. Pardonnez-moi. Whoops. I did not copy as much as I thought I did. That's supposed to go with that. That'll probably stop it from being broken. Also, I guess we need that whole line too. Copy pasting, it's hard sometimes. For this to work, this file needs to be named this. So we'll just rename this file to that instead. No harm, no foul on that. Everything will still work the way it's supposed to. Now, we have this new command named new latex document that will invoke as a part of that. The next part of this that we need is a key binding. So let's copy just the part we need and say Linux default keys. If you have questions about competitive programming in Sublime or how to set it up or anything, I may or may not be able to help with that, David, by the way. Feel free to ask any questions you like. That goes for absolutely anybody that's currently watching the stream. I probably should have said user Linux key map, like so. Well, here's a key binding. Let's paste it in like that. That says that when the tab key is pressed, let's invoke the new latex command. That's this one. But it should only do it if the current file is latex and the text preceding the cursor is the word document and only the word document, that the text following the cursor is completely the end of the line. There's no spaces or anything, so this isn't a word in the middle of the buffer. That there's exactly one selection, i.e. there's one cursor, not 2 or 3 or 4, and that the selection is empty. That is, this is not an empty selection, and this is. And if all of those cases are true, it'll invoke new latex document. So, in theory, what we could do here is say scratch buffer proper syntax for latex, and then type document, hit tab, and shoot. Hang on a second, that file is not named correctly. No problem. Thanks for stopping by, Roy, and thanks for letting me know that my audio was busted too. That was a good catch. Why does our command not do what we expect it to do? That's there. That's there. There. Here. Sublime.log commands. And then we type document tab. It did it. It tried to run one named... Oh, it wants to run the macro. Pardon me. Okay. Yeah, I should have paid attention to my own post, huh? We'll just snag that too then, shall we? Oh, what's it supposed to be called? It's supposed to be called that. We'll just copy that, and in my user package, it should be named new latex document.sublime macro, like so. So let's go over that again because I got that part wrong. And part of the reason, you know, I say this a lot in a lot of my live streams here and on Twitch and whatever. everything that we're doing here is fully live. I have ideas of stuff that I'm going to do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is what development is. So if you're used to watching videos that are very highly edited, where there's no typos, no mistakes, and everything works the first time, that's not really how the world works. And I like to do live streams just to hang out with, with everybody and work on stuff and see what questions people have and connect and that sort of thing. Also to provide an extra resource for people that are interested in how this stuff works, something that they can sort of watch. But also to let you know that if you're working on this stuff and you're having some sort of an issue or a problem, even someone that has been doing this for 38 years will still make a silly problem. Like, say, for example, accidentally having their microphone cut out for whatever reason. Now I'm all paranoid about it, and I keep checking to make sure that it's actually doing something. So what we have here is a plugin, which when executed removes the last word on the line and then triggers the run macro file command to execute a specific macro. We have that specific macro that's stored in my user package, which executes. Oh, sorry, that's not the macro. Pardon me. This one's the macro. That's the command palette entry. I saw the square brackets and got confused and disoriented. There we go. When the macro triggers, it's going to automatically insert the snippet new latex document, which is this one. It is going to then execute the insert date command with a specific format, and then it's going to jump to the next field. So it's important that the date be the first thing. And then if we type document tab, we end up with something that has the date, and we're up here at the title. So this is one way to actually pull this off, and it works fairly decently. And potential issue with it is that for every different snippet you want to set up, you have to set up one of these macros here. So it works. It's not the greatest of situations by any stretch of the imagination. Are there any other ways that we could pull something like this off? I'm going to name that, and I'm going to name my key binding here. I'm going to make it say org document as well. The thing that makes this a solution that's not great is that for every one of these that you create, you're going to have to create a snippet that has the date as the first field, and then that bit there. And then you would have to make sure to have a macro that triggers the appropriate snippet. And then you have to create a key binding that uses the appropriate preceding text to trigger the command on tab. That's a lot of setup. If you've only got a couple of these, it's not the end of the world. But we want Sublime to make our lives more sublime, right? That's kind of the theory. Now, there's some magic that we could potentially do here. Just for our purposes, I'm going to comment out that, and we'll just sort of scooch it to the bottom of the file, because we probably don't really care about it for right now. Let me just quit and restart to make sure that command goes away. One of the other things that we can do is create an event listener, which we could even do something like say that this is from the Sublime plugin view event listener base class. There's two different kinds of event listeners in Sublime Text plugins. There's event listeners and view event listeners. An event listener is kind of just a restart of Sublime Text is strongly encouraged. All right. That happened because I restarted Sublime. That's probably the first time I've done that in a long while. As I was saying, there's two different kinds of event listeners. There's regular just event listener, which looks like this. And then there's view event listener. A regular event listener is sort of global, if you will. No matter where you are in Sublime, if that particular event that you're listening for happens, you'll get told about it. An example of that might be on save. The on save event triggers whenever a file has just is being saved, or sorry, rather on post save. On pre-save will trigger right before a save is about to happen, and on post-save triggers right after the save happens. If you use an event listener, that's global. So anytime any file anywhere ever gets saved, your event listener triggers. Sometimes you want to constrain the situations in which an event listener actually fires. And one of the ways that we can do that is with view event listener. A view event listener attaches itself to a specific view, if you will. View in Sublime being a tab or an editable area, if you will. This area at the bottom of the console is a view. This is a view. The command palette input for you to type text is a view, etc. All of those things are views, and you can tell a view event listener to only listen for events in specific views. And since what we're trying to do here is create an event listener that will do this for only things in latex in this particular case, what we could do is say that there should be a static method. No, it should be a class method. And the name of the class should be the method rather should be is applicable. It's going to get the class, and it's going to get a settings object. The default for this is just to return true, like this. If we had another little event in here, what would be a good one for this as an example? On text command, like this. It's going to take the command, it's going to take args, and then we could do something like print text command executed, and then the name of the thing might be command, for example. So if we save that, assuming that we did it correctly, which we didn't because that's all off by one character. Boo. Now every time a text command happens in here, you can see it triggering. I'm moving 2, I'm moving 2, I'm moving up, I'm moving down. We can see it tracking down there because those are all text commands and they happen absolutely everywhere. And that's because this event listener listens for is applicable to say, do you apply to a view that has these particular settings? And you can say yes or no. The default is to return true so that your view event listener always applies everywhere. If we were, for example, to set this to false, then keys no longer cause anything to move anymore, right? No matter what file we're in. Even if we're in this file, it doesn't cause anything to happen. We could do something like return self.view.settings.get do it and false, like this. A view event listener, pardon me, I forgot what we're doing here. It does have one, but there's a settings object that is passed, and that setting is going to be the settings for a particular view. The get method, this is just like a Python dictionary. It's going to try to get the field with a particular value. If it's not there, it's going to return this. So this is going to assume that if the do it setting isn't set to anything, the value is false, otherwise it's true. Now, doesn't do anything here, and doesn't do anything here. But if I said view settings, in this particular view, please set the setting do it to true. Now in this field, that event triggers. You can see it happening there. But in this one, it doesn't. Not unless we set that setting, like so. And then give this the focus. So what we can do here is take advantage of the fact that we want this to only trigger in a latex document, right? And if we were to do something like ask the view settings for this particular view to get the syntax of this, it's going to tell us this. The default syntax for this is in the latex package, and it's named latex.sublime syntax. The syntax that's used is actually just a setting. So we could say return settings.get syntax. That's always going to be set. We could return true if this is in that, or false if it's not. Now, this isn't a LaTeX file, so moving around does squat, and this is a LaTeX file, so moving around works. So with one single line here, we've basically done this part of our custom key binding here. Now our event only ever triggers inside of a LaTeX file. And you could configure that however you might like. We don't actually want that as an event though. What we want is on query completions. We're going to have to look at documentation for this. It's always going to take self because every method always takes a self. Normally there would be a view here that says in which view the completions are being queried for, but because view event listeners are tied to a specific view, that doesn't need to be passed. That's just going to be a self.view argument. We're also going to have something called a prefix. That is the text to the left of the completion text that was provided. There's going to be a locations as well. And is that all there is? I think so, but let's check and see. It's going to be the view event listener. It's going to take prefix and locations. Check that out. I totally actually knew what I was saying for that particular one. So this is called whenever completions are going to be presented to the user. And for our purposes here, completions are that. There's a bunch of places where these come from. It's sourcing words directly from the buffer. That's where those things come from. There are snippet files like this that will appear if they happen to apply. They don't. This one doesn't apply here because it says that it's only applying in a LaTeX file, and that's not LaTeX. If I did that same thing over here, then one of the things that pops up would be the document, which, if triggered, would invoke the actual thing. Well, sorry, org document. I forgot I renamed it. And you can see that little S in there specifies that this is a snippet, like so. There are Sublime completion files, which are a static way to inject a bunch of completions all at once if they're just single liners. Those appear in here as well. And the other thing that appears in here is the results of an on-query completions. Now you can see here, locations is a list of locations in the buffer where cursors are sitting. View match selector should be called to determine if the point is relevant. Normally that would be the case. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case for us here. We could make it be more specific. Hey Ayush, welcome. How you doing? Normally what you would do is something like, I'd only want to apply completions in a LaTeX file, but since this particular listener only listens in a LaTeX file, we don't need to do that. We knew that this is indeed it is, Ayush, indeed it is. Nice profile picture you got there. Glad you're doing good. And you can still hear me okay? Cool. What this is going to do is it gets told a few things. It gets told the text behind the cursor. So in this case, the prefix would be the word pass. And it gets a list of the locations in the file where the thing actually is. Remember, locations are points. Points are offsets into the buffer. So this is location 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, ad nauseum for the whole thing. Using that location, pardon me, you can figure out where the cursor is inside of the file to know what might be the thing that you want to provide completions for example. We don't necessarily need to do something with that. We could make this very smart. If you can imagine the notion that you wanted to expand out only the methods in a particular class, and you knew that what type of thing it was, then using the location, you could figure out that you're in a line of code. You could use the prefix to figure out partially what the name of the method is supposed to be. The location allows you to examine the whole line of code, which should allow you to figure out what comes, say, before the dot in the thing that you're expanding. Then you could come up with a list of only the completions that apply in that situation and return them. We're going to be a lot dumber about that here. We can just go ahead and return some stuff. One thing we can return is none, which means there aren't any completions. That's what's happening right now. There's no return statement here. No completions are actually happening. We could return a list of things like this, where there's just the completion text and the insertion. So say, for example, we were to return an array of items. The first item might be first and the first thing, like so. This takes snippet variables, so we could do that. And now inside of here, because this is latex, if I type first and hit tab, there's the completion, and it expands out. There is the first thing, and the cursor's inside of the brackets. This is one thing that we could actively do in here. You can do multiples of those. If you want the thing that inserts to always be the word, like this, I don't know why you'd want to, but since there's this, you can trigger it and it'll just expand out. The shortcut for doing something like that, if that's what you want to do, is just a single thing, and then it should still work the exact same way, like so. Same thing applies to Sublime completion files as well. That's that one. You can also provide it a 2-element tuple that does the same thing, but you can provide special items in here that says, say, inhibit explicit completions or word completions. Word completions being the words that pull out of the buffer, and explicit completions, pardon me, I feel like I have to sneeze, but prevents if I'm from showing the completions based on Sublime completions files. Those are a sort of file that I haven't showed in this particular example. You can insert this in here if you wanted to re-ask every time you type, so that it can narrow in on something that you're actually doing, and so stop it from changing the completion order if you want it to. It's an interesting thing as well. The other thing that we can provide is a completion list object, which is a whole thing in its own right. We should also be able to return a completion item out of here. And I'm kind of confused about why that's not in here. I don't think I updated this part of the documentation for that. We're going to have to go to the... Oh, and that documentation doesn't look as cool as it could. That's kind of unfortunate. We could look for... on query completions. The other one. It's going to get a prefix. It's going to get a list of locations. It needs to return back a list of completion values or a tuple containing a list of completion values and the flags, or a completion list. Completion list is a more dynamic sort of thing. Things that you can return are an array of strings. This is the one that we saw previously. You can also short circuit this by providing just single arrays with 2 things, but if you're only going to do that, you can do it in a shorter way instead of wrapping each one of these individual things in an array. You can, I didn't mention this either, but you can include text inside of the trigger there. So in our particular example here, like this, Firsty McFirst $0. Because that says first and this says the thing, when you trigger it, the thing appears there to help you figure out what that actually is before you invoke the situation. You can do that if you like. You can use these snippet fields, as I pointed out. You can create a completion item. And this is the sort of thing where we're going to play with here to see if there's a little something that we can do about this. Because a completion item is a class that allows us to do some extra stuff. So let's look at the documentation for that. Represent an available auto-completion item. There's the text that triggers it, the hint to draw to the right-hand side of the trigger. That's the text to the right of the /t in our other example. The text to insert if the completion is triggered, the format of the completion, and some kind information, and then some details down at the bottom. And there's a couple of, or there should be some sample shortcuts in here. I wonder why there's not. They changed the documentation recently. I'm not a super fan of the new layout. I mean, it follows the code, but it's not as easy to read as it used to be. I will say that. Let's see if I have it in my own documentation here. No, huh? Completion item. Oh, we do. Cool. It's just not linked from the appropriate location. There's a snippet completion. There's a command completion. That's what we're looking for here. Let's copy all of this stuff out. Like thus. So we're going to drop this into this thing. I'm just going to paste that in and then we'll comment it so it doesn't cause us any issues. But what we can return in here is completion item dot command completion. The text that we want to use to trigger this, let's do it this way. The trigger is going to be the word document, right? We're going to need to specify a command to do something. We're going to pass args as something. We're going to pass annotation as our snippet, create new document, let's say. That's the text that will appear to the right of the trigger. And then we can leave out the kind and we can leave out the details for our purposes here. So right now, with just the way this is, if we were to come over here and do document, or even that, it should, oh, completion item is not defined. Oh, hang on. My bad. Import that symbol so that it'll work a little bit better, yeah? Here it is. That says document. That says create a new document. And when we trigger it, nothing happens because there's not actually any command named something, right? Oh. So there's a few things that we could actually pull here. Let's say we don't necessarily care about that because we're going to pull this config from somewhere else. And do we really care about this or no? Because we could actually do these things directly inside of the snippet text that we're about to expand out, or we can have the snippets inlined in here. For the purposes of us here, I'm going to copy that and bring it over into here. And just sort of, again, whoops, paste that and comment those just to keep it out of the way. We have this command that we put down here at the bottom. Maybe we want to actually bring that back here. Oops. And uncomment it, but we maybe wanted to do something a little bit different than what it's currently doing. Needs to be does it need to be a text command? It could be a text command. It doesn't have to be a text command. Realistically, there are so many ways to pull this off that I'm trying to decide which way might be the coolest way. One thing that we could actually do here. Keep hearing ghost sounds, and I'm not sure what they actually are. The actual snippet we care about is this. This is the snippet content that we care about. So here's what we're going to do. Let's copy that. All right. We'll go to here. Let's build this out and then say doc snippet is equal to this text, like this. Maybe we make that a raw string so that it doesn't get all cranky about that. That syntax highlighting leaves a lot to be desired, though. In a real-world situation, we would probably invoke this by loading this stuff from a file, not doing it this way. Instead of one current date here, I think we would call this date or no. Let's do this. Let's do that. So $1 is going to be the first snippet field. $2 will be the second snippet field. It exits at at this. This says that the initial value for field 2 is title. This says the initial value for field 1 is whatever the value of the date is that we provide in here. This is one of those things that snippets can do that people may not be entirely familiar with. Since that's the snippet that we're interested in, the actual, we could, oh, yeah, here's what we can do. We can make this command be insert snippet like this. I can't remember the args of that command off the top of my head, so let's check. Insert a snippet from a string or contents. How did I forget contents? That's the irony of the century. Come back to that. Whoops. Here. So in our little args dictionary here, the contents is going to be doc snippet like that. And then if we said date, some date goes here like this, we don't actually need this command at all. So let's just get rid of it entirely. In the world of the purely theoretical, if that actually worked, did I break the code? Oh, because that's not a string, because I've been doing a little bit too much JavaScript lately. Pardon me. That should look like that. Document inserts out the default text is some date goes here, yay, and then it goes to there, and then it goes to there. So all we really need is for some date there to be some date there, right? And this is where this whole thing becomes magic-like. Because if you wanted the current date, datetime dot datetime. Can never remember how to work a date. Here, let's do this. Tired of seeing that, so let's do that for the time being. For this particular account, Python get current date as a string. Because I can never remember how it works. And from datetime, import datetime. Oh, it's today. Right. Okay. So let's do that. We go into our code here. That's not the code. That's the code. From datetime, import datetime, like yaw, right? Down here, the default date is that, but instead of this, we use X because that's what was used in our little sample here. In this particular one, when we were playing with this, we used %x there, which is what we have there. So now, what we have is a document that inserts the current date. A potential issue with this is if you invoke the completion panel and then just sort of sit here for a while before you do it, you end up with the wrong date. And also the crudeness by which we're pulling that out is causing us a problem here as well. But this is a one-stop shop for something like this. Now, if you imagine that this was actually something that was configurable and perhaps a little bit smarter because it has that thing in there that we don't actually want. So let's say we do view package file for default new templates. What we want is something like that. If this is going to be from default dot new templates, import reformat, and then this could be indented so that it'll look a little bit nicer. I think that should work because that's what this does, right? No, it doesn't. Hang on. We want a little something like yaw. That sort of tracks what that's doing, right? Yeah. So now when we invoke our document snippet, we don't end up with that blank line at the top there. So that is a pretty easy way to pull something like that. So yeah, what we want is a way to expand this out so that you don't have to modify the code directly in order to do it, which is something that would be fairly easy to do. If these things were listed in a file somewhere as snippets, you load them in. Maybe you give it a folder of existing snippets and parse them as XML, for example. That would also work just fine. What we would probably want to do is configure the date format for these things as well. But again, that would be configuration type information. Now, here's a question. Python parse XML. The XML L tree, element tree, and mini DOM. Which one of these is built in? That one is. Yeah, I'm sure that's probably just fine. Because snippet files are themselves XML type files. Here's a question. Oh, this snippet's totally broken. We'll gloss over that. The one from the snippet. I'm kind of curious. There's the one from the snippet, and then there's ours. One's marked as a snippet and one's not. There's a setting we can use to exclude snippets from completions. But we wouldn't want to do that while we're actually actively importing stuff here, right? That would cause an issue. Okay, we don't care about you. Let's close you for the time being. That's the thing we're working on. That's a snippet that we've actually inlined. We should actually keep that, but we don't need the macro. And the key binding that we inserted to show that example is also not something we care about, so we can get rid of that as well. We do need a scratch buffer for this sort of thing, but that's about it. So, the thing that we want to do here is something like this. X equals sublime dot load resource packages user new latex document dot sublime dash snippet. And now X is the XML content of that particular snippet, which I'm just going to scoot over here for the time being to keep it out of the way. With that, how do we use this thing to actually parse? Oh, look, here's totally some XML. Boy, that's... I guess we probably want something like this instead of what I did in there, if we're going to follow this. So we want et dot from string x, basically. Hey, Cyberlanx, welcome. How you doing? Oh, I cased it in a way that does not make sense. What is the good word? How is your week going? I guess we actually need the... Alright, so now we have the root element, which is a snippet. Yep, that makes sense. How do we pull stuff out of this thing? Child nodes over which we can iterate. Children are nested. I guess what we really want is this. A string identifying what kind of element this represents. Root.tag. Snippet. It's not lying. Oh, not too shabby. The stream started off kind of unfortunate because my audio cut out, and I talked for like 4 minutes or 5 minutes straight before someone pointed out that, in fact, they could not hear me. Well, that's kind of ironic. It worked during the pre-test, and then something went all hinky. So I've been living in constant fear of the little bars bouncing but doing nothing in the EQ thing there. We don't really care about those keys, and find all matching sub. Oh. That's interesting. What are we actually interested in information-wise out of this thing? We have the root snippet. But if we wanted to find, say, the content, That's it right there. That whole leading new line thing is kind of a kick in the jimmy jams, though. Because it doesn't otherwise do anything as far as the root is concerned. The tab trigger is something that we care about. The, whoops. The description is something that we care about, if there is one. And the scope is probably something that we care about too. Yeah. Ah, Zed Fleet. Hey, hey. Well, hello, Chuckles, which is a cool name. Welcome. Yeah, I had a thing for Zed, and my MacBook is still over here in the position of power, but there's something busted about the hard drive. The company's not going to pay to fix it, and I'm not either, and I don't do enough Mac stuff, so I guess I'm just sort of SOL on the whole Mac front. Fleet, though. I'm kind of curious about Fleet, but also kind of not. Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to be done there. Fleet might be interesting, except that I'm not technically a fan of IDEs, and it would have to be like if Sublime is here, Fleet would have to be here for me to care, JVM notwithstanding, because the reason why I use Sublime right now is because I spent a long time using JetBrains products that were written in Java, and they were just so large and slow and bloated and full of crap that I never wanted or needed to use. They were just harder to use than they needed to be. So anything that they make has to be freaking fantastic before all of that is going to, push me over. And yeah, I don't see anything Java related or JVM related because they're using Kotlin, I would imagine. I don't see anything like that in any way being anything that I would be interested in. Also, the whole IDE thing as well. It's really not my situation. I like having a dedicated text editor that I can augment and such. I mean, for what it is, right? I'm really unhappy about how that part works, but nevertheless. Let us say that what we were interested in is well, we can get simple and then we can get complicated later, right? Indeed, yeah. I actually use a couple of LSP things myself. I use LSP Quicklint.js for all of my JavaScript stuff. If you're unfamiliar, if you do anything JavaScript related and all you're looking for is linter type stuff, I would highly recommend giving this bad boy a try. All it does is lint your JavaScript. It doesn't do any sort of style checking or formatting or anything like that. It only provides, things that you can see in the GIF like, hey, this variable isn't defined, or it's a constant, or stuff like that, but it does it ridiculously fast. On the flip side, I've been using a lot of Tailwind CSS for my projects over on Twitch. That's the one. This thing is like fantastic. I even have one of his dusty stickers to stick on my laptops. Whoop. I've been using a lot of Tailwind for my stuff on my Twitch streams, and I tried to install LSP Tailwind, and it made everything so punishingly slow to edit inside of attributes in CSS and in all of my files where CSS classes might be, that I had to remove it. I was seeing like visible press a key result. I don't know what the hell it's doing behind the scenes, but whatever it's doing is slow. But I've never used the Java one because I haven't done anything Java related in quite some time. But it's one of the things that, you know, and I say this a lot, I don't tool shame. IDEs aren't for me. That doesn't mean that IDEs are gross or awful or anything like that. It's just not the way that I find works best for me personally, which is why I use Sublime for this stuff, right? But everybody's got their own way to work. So, you know, more power to anybody that wants to use an IDE like Visual Studio Code or Fleet or IntelliJ or WebStorm or PyCharm or RubyMine or any of that sort of stuff. They're good tools for what they are. If the trade-offs are, you know, acceptable for you for getting your throughput of work done, that is what makes a good tool. Not that it's named a certain thing, that it's something that allows you to work at the speed that you need to work at and want to work at and helps you rather than hindering you. Yeah, and that's one of the things too. Someone asked me about the Sublime Debugger, and I'm like, I know there is a thing. It kind of works like LSP does, in that there's a one package that sort of interfaces with a debugger, but I don't do a lot of debugging. Like the stuff that I normally work on at work is all processes that are heavily multi-threaded. Think like 13 threads plus. 13 is the bare minimum just to have a hello world application running under our infrastructure. And with all of that many threads running in multiple applications, running across multiple systems, all interacting with each other, tracing through something in a debugger step by step is the debug of last resort. We try every possible thing that we can do to resolve a problem before we have to resort to that, because it is just such a pain in the butt. $5 gigs? Wow. I used IntelliJ right up through version, I think, 12. Whatever the version was that came out, and then they went to their subscription instead of having always perpetual. Whatever that first subscription version was, that's the last version that I have, and then I just kind of tapped out there. Yeah, LLDB, GDB, if we're lucky, you know. Most of the time, anything that we're debugging is something that it's already too late, is another one of the things. We process stock data at a fantastical rate, you know, like 150,000 messages per second or so. So we only really know when there's a problem when someone tells us that something went awry. In which case, trying to figure out what went wrong is kind of hard to recreate in the first place. Wow. What's their subscription cost for that now? I can't even remember what it was back in the day. And is that for the... Do they still do that whole... You get the toolbox version and get access to everything, or can you like dial it in to just get specific tools for some sort of discount? That's like per year? No. Whoosh. Do they have like student discounts or anything? I gotta say, of all of the Java tools I've used in my day, you know, Eclipse, JetBrains, IntelliJ, rather, by JetBrains. I keep calling it JetBrains. That's not what it is. The tool is IntelliJ. NetBeans are the top three that come to mind. I really did like uh, IntelliJ the most out of all of them, but it had so much stuff. I mean, I guess I'm just not a Java developer or I don't work the way that the IDE wants me to work, but there was just so much stuff that never really applied to anything that I was doing. Let's stick that down there for the time being. We have an example of a thing that works here. I'm kind of curious about something. What if there was some sort of function in here called load snippets, and when the plugin loaded, we called load snippets. What would this actually do? Something interesting, I'm assuming. We would find resources for star.sublime-snippet, like so. $199 without discount per year for renewal. Wow. Now, the prices of these sorts of things are... As a software developer myself, I write software. I want to get paid. So I don't begrudge people wanting to sell their stuff. I kind of have an issue with subscriptions versus perpetual licenses, but you know, I can also see how if it's a perpetual license that you buy once and then never have to pay again, there's that whole idea of once somebody buys the software, you've sort of lost them as a customer unless you can provide them some new value add that makes them want to purchase a new copy. So you have to keep trying to put new features in to entice people. But how do you pay for the features if you haven't enticed people in to buy the thing to give you the money to pay the people to do the thing? I know JetBrains' issue was they spent by their own admission, they were focusing on new features to try and drive turnover. By my experience, they spent so much time implementing new features that they never really fixed any of the ones they added in prior versions that had issues, unless it was a really, really common thing that enough people hit. So my use for IntelliJ tools, particularly IntelliJ and WebStorm, kept tripping up very, very, very annoying workflow destroying bugs that apparently I'm the only one that hit, and I knew they were never going to get fixed. So I can see why they did that. I didn't like the way that JetBrains said that it was a perpetual license, but from the start of the period that you started paying and not for the point at which you stopped paying. Always sat a little wrong with me, but they did, but they didn't. It doesn't work. It doesn't work kind of like that. But yeah, and in the grand scheme of things, the Sublime license model now is you just get updates for 3 years, and at the end of the 3 years, keep using any version you've had up until now, perfectly fine. Or if you want another 3 years, pay again. So you're never forced to do it. I find that it's a nice middle ground there. I would pay every year for a thing, but I wouldn't pay every year for a subscription, because subscription has the connotation that if you stop paying, you'll lose access, and that's the part of the for core development tools. That sort of sits wrong with me for what that's worth. And in particular, the way JetBrains implemented it, where they said, all right, here's what's going to happen. At the start of the year, you pay for a year of stuff, of subscription for IntelliJ. And at the end of the year, you have a perpetual license to that version that you've been using for the past year. And if you stop paying, it reverts to what you had at the beginning of the period. I didn't like that reverting to the beginning of the period, because if I was someone that was relying on the tools to do work and for some reason something happened and I couldn't maintain the subscription and I had to fall back to an earlier version, that would carry me potentially back into the area where there were features I was relying on that are now gone because they weren't implemented, or bugs that I was relying on them being fixed and now they're not. So that really turned me off of the whole situation, and that's why I started looking for other tools. But yeah, I don't begrudge any developer for wanting to get paid for anything, you know. Ah, that's interesting. Yeah. I also thought it was kind of fun that they have a very good platform for what it is, you know, like the same core technology works all of their editors in such a way that if you have, like, I think it was at the time, if you had IntelliJ, their most expensive flagship product, then you could include the plugins that turned it into any of the other language tools that you wanted. But the other thing to consider is that if you're a professional developer working, then presumably you're making money from the work that you're doing, so of course you can always continue to pay, but not everybody is in that kind of situation. So that is a lot of those. The theory that I have for this particular plugin here is we could find all of the snippets, we could parse them, and we could generate these values for ourselves directly. And then do that to expand them out. Yeah, I think that's the way to go for stuff like this. LSP is a great idea for the sake of, why should every editor everywhere constantly have to reinvent the wheel, you know? I'm kind of surprised that the people that came with Microsoft was the one that came up with LSP and the language servers, that they did it in a way where other people could use them. I bet they do, yeah. What time we got? We still got some time. Why do I have so many freaking snippets in here? Let's do this. So that'll still do the same thing. We're kind of spitballing out loud what's going to happen with this thing. For snippet in snippets. Wait. That's a Python thing, right? Cool. I would say Sublime needs a native, but frankly, the plugin LS. Yeah. Indeed. And I'm not sure if you're probably familiar with what all went down with that, but way back in what was it, like December of 2019, when John put out the first private beta version for Sublime 4 to people in the Discord and said, let's just keep it amongst ourselves. We want it because you guys are the people that are most familiar with Sublime. You'll be able to put it through its paces. And then, you know, I asked him at that point, when that very first public or semi-private beta, it wasn't like nobody can know about it. He asked us to not link the downloads or anything, you know, but I asked him, how long do you think this is going to be before it actually goes live? Because I was thinking, I'm going to have to create a video about this. This is spectacular. And he said, probably a couple of weeks. And it was over a year and a half. And a lot of that time was spent with the developers of the LSP package going back and forth with Sublime HQ about, we want to do this, but we need this kind of API. This doesn't work the way that we need it to. We need this sort of functionality as well. So in my opinion, Sublime 4 took as long as it took to release because everybody was really going out of their way to provide as good a core experience for the plugin side as possible to make LSP be a thing. I could see why they don't want to have it as a native component, because that adds a support burden on the core team, which is only, well, the whole of the company is like 6. I can't remember how many people Ben said Ben's the lead, and there's like 1 or 2 other developers, I think, that are working on Sublime besides him. So it's a very small core. Having them have to support the whole of Sublime plus that, when they could just support the API, which benefits everybody, and then LSP can fill that gap. I really think that is the way to go for that stuff as well, personally. Biased though I may be, that I enjoy Sublime. Isn't Tree Sitter something that is in Visual Studio too, or am I misremembering that? Switch over to coffee. I guess that's one weak spot in Sublime's APIs, right? There's a ways to do semantic highlighting in LSP, but by the strictest letter of the law, how that works isn't supposed to be a thing. I doubt it would go away now, though, since Terminus relies on it, amongst other things. There are examples of it out in the wild. Okay, that's still not crashing, so that's cool. How about this? For resource in snippets, let's say XML is that, and oh no, actually we can leave that the way it was. Pardon me. Root can be, oh, fudge. How did I do that? Something dot from string XML, basically. Thanks, David. And that will be on Wednesday, where we're going to continue with some UI related stuff. And I'm kind of worried about how I'm actually going to pull some stuff off in there. We're going to try to create a JavaScript schema that represents controls in a page and dynamically spit them out in a Svelte template. It'll be fun, or I will go mildly insane. One of those two. I don't know which. Atom, VSC, and NeoVim. Does Visual Studio proper also use LSP, or does it still have its own core experience? That still works. Trigger equals root dot find tab trigger dot text, and that's probably pooping out, isn't it? Yeah, that figures. Why can I never remember how freaking exceptions in Python work? Right. Oh. Oh. Derp. Balls. From XML. Sorry. Yeah. Import xml.etree.element tree as. We'll do that. Okay. Everything should have a tab trigger, one would assume. Boy, there's a lot of snippets in here, I'm not gonna lie. That's definitely going to blow some stuff up, I would assume. Yeah. That's okay, though. Don't need that part either. Not everything has a tab trigger and a description. Maybe we might even do this in a nicer way. Let's add the correct stuff on the end. Then we don't need that, and we don't need... Oh, actually, no, we don't... Yeah, let's just leave that the way it is. Insert the help... Oh, the ones from my package. Haha! All right. Everything should have a tab trigger. Ignore anything that doesn't have a tab trigger, because that's going to be useless, right? What else do we need out of this thing? There's the trigger. Contents. Which is the content. Sorry, content. That'll give us the snippet content. We need to probably trim left on the content of that thing. Yeah. Strip, isn't it? Whoops. Yeah. That's both, but if we L strip it, we only get that part. Yeah. That's as simple as it is to dump out all of the snippets. The test prog snippet, which is a C# stub, has this content, and etc. and etc. and etc. And we'd have to be smart enough to know that not everything has a description, in which case we could just sort of null that out, right? Hey, Augie. Hello. Welcome. Welcome to the stream. How do? We're just playing with just a little bit of a plug-in idea. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but it's a fun thing to play with. What if we could create a system that allows us to dynamically insert snippets that contain the current date? In fact, we might go so far as to say, if we wanted to do this, trying to think of a nice, clever way to wrap this whole thing up, you know? Technically speaking, we kind of want this information. Oh, don't do that. We kind of want this to be up here like this. Well, maybe indented properly, yeah. Is this thing using... All right, cool. Had a bit of a brain fart there. Data equals parse snippet. Actually, this is the part where we would say that if we did something like yeah, and this was actually indented in an appropriate way, and this wasn't a pass, and that's still technically loaded, and that's just going to always be cranky about everything all the time ever. Comment this up to say load the contents of the snippet as a string, then try to parse it. Maybe that throws some sort of exception, maybe not. Look up the nodes in the XML for the trigger, description, and contents. Do them in that order. We don't add the text onto these things. Oops. Like so. If there is no tab trigger, we don't care about this snippet. Trigger, decision, scope, and contents. If there's no tab trigger, we don't care about this, because what we're actually trying to do we don't really care about that. We're trying, the ultimate goal of this thing is to grab all of the snippets that are available and expose them via the plugin. And in that sort of case, we only want to expose them if they have a tab trigger, because if they don't have a tab trigger, you can't expand them via tab. It's actually possible to create snippets that don't work that way, because snippets always appear in the command palette if they apply to the current file type. They don't have to have keys. You could create one specifically for the purposes of invoking this way, in which case this isn't something that we would actually do anything with, right? So we can just say if trigger is none, return none, let's say. Otherwise, what we want to return is a tuple that is the trigger text. The content text. Scope is similar to description. So for our simplistic test here, the snippet is not none, then that's going to be snippet 0, and this, oh, actually, no. That's a whole other thing, isn't it? Axel! Hey, hey, sir! I really should have done that as a named tuple instead, you know? But we haven't fully decided how we want that to work. How's the world treating you, Axel? Fun fact, I can't say that, ask that question without immediately thinking of like a baby treats its diaper. Thank you, cheers, you've totally wrecked me. That's going to be 2. What is the Python equivalent of the null coalescing operator? It's a pity that Python doesn't provide one. I guess I could use a ternary for that. I'm doing late night work that was supposed to be done this morning, but I didn't do last week. And because I put it off, I now have questions to ask people tomorrow morning. Haha! Does that say anything? It turns out that I am a genius. Hold your applause. Oh, hang on a second.
Congratulations!
The reason why I'm a genius is we use this VPN software to connect us to the work network. And we have to use WSL for the stuff that we're doing right now. And the VPN is not set up properly. So every time you connect the VPN to the work network, the WSL environment loses access to the network in general, or in particular to the work network, because the VPN software destroys the routing table and doesn't let traffic in or out of the WSL adapter. But it's pretty easy to set up a route to fix that. So we have a simple PowerShell script that figures out the adapter index of the appropriate of the VPN adapter, and then it uses the WSL hostname command to figure out the IP of the internal thing, and then it sets up a route. So whenever you notice something is wrong, you just right-click the script on your desktop and pick Run in PowerShell, and then everything's cool. Despite that, routinely, and by routinely I mean once a day for now 2 weeks and a day of work weeks nonstop, someone contacts me to say, hey, I can't talk to the Git environment, or I can't talk to the cloud environment. And I always say, is your VPN connected? And sometimes the answer is no, and that solves the problem. But sometimes the answer to that is yes. And then I say, well, have you run the script to fix the routes? And then the answer is no. And then they run it, and that fixes the problem. 2 times in recorded memory, that didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is because PowerShell wants to be secure. And this is just some not signed script from a downloaded from the internet, just sitting on your desktop. You try to run it, and if you haven't told it that it's safe, it tells you to go to hell. Unfortunately, if you right click on a PowerShell script and say run in PowerShell and there's some problem with it, you don't get to see it, because once it's finished executing, the window disappears. So you have to have the visual acuity of like a parrot or a goldfish, or one of those things I saw in QI recently that can't watch movies because 24 frames per second is like slow motion because they see 300 frames a second. You'd never be able to see this error message. So I'm a genius, because when that happens and when you run it and it doesn't seem to fix anything, I said, open up a PowerShell shell. Now that you're in there, run that command manually, and then you see it spit out an error. I'm like, see that thing that it's telling you about? You need to fix that. And then they say, thank you, you're genius. I never would have thought of that. No, I hope this means I'm going to get a cake. Yeah, so you know which one I'm talking about. I can't remember for the life of me what the hell the thing was. Why can't X enjoy a movie? I can't remember what it was. What was it, like a pigeon, a bird of some sort? I think it was a bird of some sort, because part of one of the things that Alan said was they'd have to keep going like that because they have no stereo vision. Like, no, the frame rate just looks like slow motion to them. Yeah. On the other hand, my manager was supposed to be back at work tomorrow, but wherever he is, his flight today was canceled and postponed until tomorrow, so he's not going to be back, which means that except for a third day in a row of us having a daily stand-up where the person running the meeting says, how are we doing on the project, and we say, I don't know, the manager hasn't come back to put any tasks into the Kanban board backlog for us to pull out and start developing, so we're not actually doing anything yet. You should know that because you're also the manager. There's really not a heck of a lot that's going on at work. But stuff's going to get real exciting real soon. People keep asking me my advice on things, and I'm like, I don't think this code is as good as it could be. And that's saying something considering the crap that I'm writing right now. Let's say description.text if description is not none else none. So we can do this. And again, this is awful in the extreme. We should probably do that for all of those things, huh? And ta-da! We now have it grabbing the list of every single snippet. That's the tab text. That's the description, if there is one. A lot of the times it's none. And this is the content of the thing. I generally like who I work for too, but I mean, clearly I like helping people. I here on YouTube streaming and answering questions to anybody that has them. I do the same thing on Twitch. I create tutorial videos. I answer questions on Stack Overflow. I love helping people. I know some things are harder for some people to learn than other people. I have no problem with that. Different people learn in different ways. There, I just want to help. I want to be a helpful person. But when I get asked the exact same question by the exact same person every day for 11 consecutive work days, that's sort of bordering on the, could you maybe write down the answer that I'm giving you and refer to your notes before you talk to me? Because I don't have anything new. It's always make sure your VPN is connected, make sure you ran the script, and now I guess run the script in a shell to make sure that it's actually working. That one really only happens when you set up a new laptop, which was the case here. This particular person accidentally fed his laptop brandy and got a loaner, so we had to reset some stuff up. There are things on the internet that are how to ask a good question, and one of the criteria on that is asking in a way that shows that you've done some research on your end because you really want to nerd snipe somebody into, and there's an XKCD about this as well, making something sound like an intriguing question to answer and then immediately saying, and here are all the obvious things that you probably would have thought of. I tried them and it didn't work. Immediately makes people like me go, well, why didn't that work? And then you got me and I'm in there solving your problem. But when you just say it's not working and you don't provide any context or what you tried or what you didn't try or what you expected it to do versus what it actually did, that speaks to a level of like, I'll try to help you if I can, but it really doesn't seem like you're actually trying to help yourself here. There's only so, I guess the way to say it is there's only so many hours in the day, and if I have a pile of people that have asked a good question, people that have asked a not as good question or a question they've asked before, generally the one pile gets exhausted before I go to the other one, kind of thing, right? So you're helping everybody by doing that. But again, that probably sounds more petulantly complainy than I mean it to. I just sort of, at this point, it's actually kind of intriguing. I'm wondering how big or how long the record is going to be for somebody asking me one of those two questions on a daily basis, because I would not have guessed that the answer would be 11, given the fact that there's only 3 people that would be asking the question to begin with. Oh. Do we want to be even more strict about this? I think we probably do. We probably don't want to do it that way, but for the time being. If snippet is not none and fine, oh, hang on. Well, I'll just do that. Hang on. The snippet content is the 3rd item. Don't put brackets around it. This isn't JavaScript. I really wreck my head. It's the 3rd one. Of all of the snippets that exist, there's only one that includes the text date, and is this. And there's the content of it. So we've taken it from finding all the snippets to only finding the one. Now we might note that we have this here, but we don't actually need it anymore because this thing actually has the thing that we need. So what if, go with me here, what if this was smarter like this? And instead of returning this, it returned one of these. If there's no tab trigger, or content.text find date is equal to -1, do nothing. Yeah. What if this wasn't doing the wrong thing? Instead of hard coding the string document, this would actually be the trigger text. The command is always insert snippet. The contents is going to be the content text. The date's always going to be the current time. And the annotation would be the description, but not really the description. This is the part where this thing sort of falls all on its butthole, if you will. Instead of printing them that way, let's just print snippet because it's got an appropriate thing in it. Then we don't have any of that kind of logic going on in there. And trigger is equal to trigger text. Description is equal to none if description is none, else description.text, because why not? In fact, why don't we just do that for all of them, because why not? There might not be a tab trigger. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but you know. And we're going to ignore this part for the time being, because there's not any way to actually store it in there, which is a whole other situation. Let's do that. Or... oh, actually, how about this? If none is in the trigger or the content, or that text isn't in there, do nothing. That's kind of a neat way to do that. It does require us to do it in the appropriate order, though. This gets us the node, which might be none if there is no appropriate tag in the snippet. Yeah. Pull out the text for everything in the ugliest possible way. Anything for which there is no tag is none. Well, plugins are awesome, and if you follow me on YouTube here, this is pretty much all we work on in these things. Sometimes it's my own package. Sometimes it's just a thing where I'm like curious. Now, if you've ever wondered, if you've ever like watched me in the forum or other places, and someone will ask some weird esoteric question, and I immediately chime in with an answer, and someone will be like, "How the hell do you know that?" This is why I know that. Weird ideas occur to me, and I have a weird compulsion to follow them through just to see what happens. And, you know, that's how you learn. Make a dumb mistake. If there's no tab trigger or the content doesn't include the special date trigger. We don't care. Return. In fact, we could actually do this a little bit smarter still for what it is we're actually trying to pull off here. Again, sometimes it's tricky to finish one of these things because I keep thinking of ways to make what I've already done be structured a cooler way. Okay. Now, this is a list of resources. For every entry in the resources, do that. Let's say this. Snippets is equal to an empty list. If snippets isn't done, then snippets dot append snippet, assuming that's how that works. I can never remember. Okay, cool. Sometimes you use too many languages, you really wreck your head. Okay. Find all of the Sublime snippets and parse them out, turning them into completion objects we can use later. And then return snippets. Yeah. Then, do we care about this doc snippet? Hells no. This doc snippet can go straight to hell. We don't give a crap about that doc snippet. What we do care about is some sort of snippet list as being empty, and then we probably have to say global snippet list, and then we can say snippet list is equal to load snippets. Now we can print snippet list whenever the plugin list loads, and what we see is an empty thing, huh? Boy, I really boned that one up. Where did I spell it wrong? Idiot. Clear the console, save the plugin. Stir object has no attribute text. Did I already do one of those wrong? I probably did, huh? None of triggers, none trigger text. Oh, I probably did that. I changed up how that was going to work. In theory. And that one too. There we go. Now this is loading a completion item. Now we get to the meat and potatoes of this thing, because we don't need to return that dynamically created one. We just return snippet list like this. And now, because there is a snippet that looks like this, and boop, we save that. An issue with this is that we have to also save that, but then there's one called document, boop, and we expand it out and it says and poop, and it already has the date in there, and that all just sort of works the way we want it to. So our issue now is that if you wanted to do something like this, you probably wouldn't do it this way. You'd probably just do that and make this be 1, right? And then That gives us the title, the date's already in there, and away we go. There's one other thing that we forgot in here, which is that when you expand this version as it comes from the actual snippet itself, which is this one, it starts right on line 1, but if we expand the other one out, which is that one, we get that new line, and that's because the C data has a new line at the front of it, which Sublime ignores in that particular case. So, for the purposes of this, we would probably do something like that. And then it would work the way we want it to work. Then, the next thing to do something with here is I don't want that one to be in here. Those can go there. Those can go there. Double, double, double. This is obviously the grossest possible way to pull something like this off. There's also more information that we can put in here as well. So if we were to open up this thing, we grab that. Res kind date snippet. Then we do a little bit something like that, and then we go down to this thing and say that one of the fields we put in here is kind equals that, so that when you invoke this, this one is a snippet, and this one is a snippet with date. So if you invoke that one, you don't end up with the date, you end up with just a square bracket. And if you invoke this one, you get the actual date inside the square bracket, which seems like a nice little play on there. And then lastly, for a, not command completion, but just a details. You can throw details in here too. Details equals a thing, yay! You'll see, what's that actually for? You get to see it down at the bottom there. Same as that snippet, but inserts a date. So you could, it's easy to tell, pardon me, which one is which, without having to hover that. This also has to be one character, so, you know, that being what it is. Whoops. The other thing that we can do with this is there should be, oh, actually, we'd have to do this. Let's say we look at this one. That's not the right one, is it? A snippet has a kind ID of snippet. What the hell is that? Kind ID of snippet is going to be 8. Okay. Does that mean thus? Yes. So if we wanted to, we could make this have the official snippet color, because that's actually what it is. So this is sort of an interesting, this is where the technology of the thing flies in the face of the usability of the thing. Does it make sense to use that color because this is a snippet, and then the thing at the bottom tells you which one is which? Because otherwise it's going to be exactly identical in every way, right? The other thing that we could do to distinguish something like that is actually alter the data as we're inserting it into here. Because if there was a description, which is what the annotation is, then we could add extra stuff to it. In this particular case, we could make the description be empty if the description is none, otherwise the description text. And then this description down here could be a formatted string like that. And then when you invoke it, it would directly say that it's a snippet with date. So you don't have to have this details at the bottom. Is that a cooler thing? I don't know. We have a lot of options here. This is sort of where you run into that situation where perhaps you would make something like that configurable. Maybe you tell it to insert augmented snippet to insert. That's right. Includes current date, let's say, as a name. So snippet with date, augmented snippet includes current date. You could do that. You could do that. You could change that color of those things. All three of those things. It's kind of the... And again, yeah, I think you would probably configure at least that or that. Maybe it would be an either or something. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that that's not there more frequently. I think the way I would do it myself is that instead of doing it that way, we would set this to always be the bluish thing that I had in there previously. Like, I had the bluish one in there, right? Yeah. Boop, like so. I've already forgotten how I did that. Nope. See, this is why I always do that. Kind color. I accidentally left the ID in there. Whoops. Wait. Kind, sublime.kind color. Oh, because I'm looking at the wrong thing. Haha. Funny times. Kind ID color bluish. I didn't include it, but I was supposed to. Okay. I think I would do that regardless, because I like the idea of it. I like the idea of it being a snippet, but with a different color, because you know that it's different. And then there would be a configuration item that either inserts the includes includes that into it, which is, I mean, the naming of things is hard. I don't like that space. Well, that's a thing. I'd make that mutually exclusive, because I think you want to have some way to know that it's something that's being injected in there directly. Oh, our other issue with this is that this is not actually doing what we want it to do. There's an extra thing in here. We could add a configuration item for that, but before we do that, there's one other thing that we should probably be concerned with, and that is that this is a view event listener, which means it only applies to things that are in latex, which means that no matter what snippets this thing pulls out, it's only going to do something if it's actually a latex snippet. So that's not actually what we want. So we want this to be an event listener and not a view event listener, and we might change the name of this to custom date snippet augmented event listener. It doesn't need this method in here anymore. And now this is going to get a view because it's not a self.view. I got to quit and restart because otherwise that event listener is going to hang out in there. Now, what this is going to do for us is it's still going to work, but the same as it did before, but now it's also going to work in places where it's not supposed to. Like that. So we need to tweak that a little bit too. Fortunately, that's not too big of a deal. Let's do this. We don't actively need this anymore because we're not informing our own stuff, so that's nice. Here. Rejected completions use this kind information. To mark themselves in the right in the autocomplete panel. Since we're effectively going to duplicate any snippets that contain dates, this will help disambiguate them for people. The list of snippets that we have gathered. This is collected when the plugin loads, which means that if you alter or add snippets, you need to trigger a reload currently. I'm not entirely sure what the best way around that is because there's no in-API way to determine that a resource file has changed. There's a couple of things we could do with this, but, you know. Now, one of the things we're gathering out of here is the scope to which this thing applies, if there is a scope. Snippet should only apply in that particular case. Now, one thing to wonder here is close you. We're still going to need you. Match selector. Check the selector against the scope at the given point. Okay, so if I did view.match selector, and the selector was, oh, I got to give it a point too. Here, we'll give it a point of 0. Well, that's delightful. An empty scope will match everything, apparently. So, let's say the scope is the empty string, if scope is none. Otherwise, it's the scope text. That's giving us the text that's going to trigger the snippet, the descriptive text, which is what's going to appear as on the right-hand side, if there is one. Again, we're going to need to change that a little bit if we make that configurable, but you don't need to worry about it for right now. There should almost always be content. So you know what? Let's just make them all the same, yeah? If the empty string is in the trigger or the content, we don't care about it. If this isn't something that has the special date placeholder, we also don't care about it. So in that case, return none. Otherwise, create a completion that wraps all of this stuff and return it back. And actually, we want to return scope and that, which means that this call needs to be scope and snippet is that. And actually, in that case, this needs to return none and none because everything's always going to return two values. Put that there as the placeholder so that if it falls through, it also returns that. If there's the scope, there's the snippet, there's the thing. So now we need this, as it is defined right now, should still work the way that it always did. We should still get that there. But also we should get it here as well. And we do. Don't insert it there though, because that's not what you want. So we need a different structure for this thing, right? So instead of being an array, it's going to be a list. And the key is going to be a scope. No, is that what we want? I don't think that's what we want. Let's think about this for a second. We need to have a list. Maybe this is what we want. We need to somehow have a list of every possible snippet, but they need to be somehow grouped up by the syntax selector that selects them, so that instead of just returning all of them, we only return the ones that match the current situation. It's kind of what we have going on here. And I need to take a break for just a minute or two. So don't anybody go anywhere. I need to find the appropriate thing. I will be right back. I just got to take care of something real quick. It'll only be like a minute or two, and then we'll work a little bit more on this because this is some exciting stuff. So hang tight. Sorry about that. But everything is all taken care of. Now, here's something we should probably take a note of here. Reload the list of snippets when on post save says that we just saved a snippet. That's one time we might want to do something like that, right? Oh wait, where'd my music go? Are we just being quiet there, Pretzel Rocks? We're just being quiet. All right, cool. I can dig it. So one thing we can do is say every time somebody saves a snippet, we'll know that we can have an event that knows that that happened, and then if that happens, we can cause it to reload that particular snippet file again, and insert the appropriate information into the table. The other thing is the list of ignored packages changes. This would be a whole reload. Any other situations? So if you ignore a package, any snippets that it has in it should go away. And also, if you unignore a package, it should be scanned for snippets if we wanted to actually keep doing this dynamically. Oh, actually, let's do this. I had one more idea here. We should respect the complete include snippets setting. Setting. Don't. That's something that's important to keep in mind too, because if a person has decided they don't want to have snippets in their autocomplete list, then we shouldn't be adding some in ourselves, right? That seems like the height of unsanitariness. Manually, for cases where people delete snippets or such. Setting to control lower details versus changing the description. Is something we also want to be concerned with here. So how do we actually want to store these things in? Let's change this to get snippet completion. It's probably what we should call that. Make it look a little bit nicer. Is an empty string. We could make that cooler by lambdaing it. What would really be nice is if we could stick the scope information into the completion item itself. But, you know. Return the scope to which this snippet applies, which can be the empty string to imply everywhere. And a completion item that will expanding out the date. Yeah. Configurable date formats per snippet. Do that in the variable. And this, my friends, is how a simple idea can balloon wildly out of control just based on playing around. So we can really turn this into something here. How much time do we have? We can spend like another half hour or so to do something here. We would probably do something more exciting than that. So again, we need to have something that is basically, when this triggers, we're going to have a prefix and we're going to have location. So what we need to do is do something similar to that match view.match selector for the point that was provided in with, pardon me, each of the scopes that we know about. And for each one, see, does it apply? If yes, then these snippets need to be inserted into this particular location. I don't see any way to do that other than, in the short term anyway, this being a object or a dictionary, I guess, in the parlance of our times, which is going to change how everything else works. And this would probably be some sort of class as well. But as I always like to say, make it work, then make it pretty. Oh, do I have the ability to? No. Been waiting forever. YouTube says that gifting memberships applies to everybody. And I've been waiting to be able to gift out a bunch of them to my community as a way of saying thanks for supporting me. But they will not enable the thing. I don't know why it's taking so long. As I like to say, as I was saying there, make it work, then make it pretty. So, change this to say an object that represents a list of snippets. Python is a different beast from JavaScript, Axel. I'm not saying that's exactly how I would do that per se, because some of the stuff in this is in the package that I normally work on. Some things are actually classes. Commands have to be classes because that's just how the API works. My command browser is classes. These are all mix-ins for that similar reason, but a bunch of these things is just code that's sitting here, and so is the library of stuff as well. It just so happens, that the way that all works out. I mean, there's probably some semantic way to get around it by creating your own bytecode or something. That we want to inject into the auto completion system. In this dictionary, the keys are scopes, and the values of those keys are arrays of completion items that apply in those scopes. That's what we would have there, right? Now we're gonna change this a little bit to say snippet list, and then instead of returning, it's just gonna do something magic. can return in that case. And here, it can actually insert this thing in. Get the array into which we're going to insert our completion handler. This might be a new one. Now we need to say snippet list is equal to, oh crap. The items are equal to the snippet list getting the value of scope and returning none. If items is none, there's probably a more succinct way to pull something like this off, but items is equal to a new array and then snippet list scope to items. Then we don't need to return a scope. We can just say items.append and pass in this thing like so. And then we don't need you anymore either because we're just leaving. Right? Now where we call this, whoops. We don't need to do any of that stuff. We just need to pass it snippets. And then we return snippets. And then that is the snippet list, so we've loaded it all up. The code doesn't seem to blow up in our face, and we can see that there's one snippet for text.text.latex. And that is the completion that is inside yon list. So I'm going to comment that out, because otherwise I'm going to be unhappy. Going forward, and then we need to modify this to be cooler. Okay, that's going to break everything, so that's cool. Now, for scope in snippet list dot keys. Is that the right one? Oh, sorry. Yes. Iterate over all of the scopes for which we have loaded snippets and see if they apply. The scope needs to apply at every location. Now we have a scope. Now we need to say something like for crank. View.match selector scope for, oh, sorry. PT scope for PT in locations. So now when we trigger it, we get like a falsy type situation over there, and over here we get a truey type situation over here. If there was some sort of amended document. Interestingly, that's a false, huh? Oh, right. Why is that one a false? Oh, because latex isn't actually a supported thing. All right. Well, that makes sense, I suppose. Well, that really makes that hard to test, man. How about that? What do you think of that, Jack? That case, yeah, that's Python. This one, that's not Python. There's one true and one false. In order for this to work, if all don't put brackets around things. This isn't JavaScript. Completions.extend. I think we want something like that, yeah. Source Python and the list of stuff. Yeah, yeah. Cool. If completion, I guess we don't even need to do that. It could just be an empty array. Life is fine. All right, so now this snippet should inject into Python, but nowhere else. So there's a, oh, well, sorry, both of them will go into Python, right? Although you shouldn't do that because that's not what it's for. But it's actually supposed to be for latex. If you try to use it here, neither of them actually work. But if we put this back to the thing that it's supposed to be, then if we try to do it inside of here, then there's the one from the snippet, triggers. Why doesn't the other one show up? Why is the... Well, what the hell did we break now, Jack? Oh, sorry. That thing where I said we definitely had to do a thing, that's the thing we definitely had to do there. All right, go. There's the one from the snippet with a date, and there's the other one. So that one will insert with a date in that position, and that one won't. Jack dandy. All right, so that solves one of those problems. We probably don't need to spam that out all the time. Now, what else can we do very quickly here? What would we name a package that does something like this? Extended date snippets, date extended snippets, extended snippets, date extended snippets. Why is naming things hard? Well, actually. Move from oops. config Sublime Text packages user latex thingy to snippet loader.py like this. Wham! Now that thing's all cranky because it ain't there anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and close tabs with deleted files. And then local source date extended snippets to date extended snippets. Whoop. And we're going to quit and we're going to restart. And I'm just going to split that out for a second. And that. Because we're going to open the package, that thing I just named date extended snippets. Whoop, like that. And then we can get rid of this window and put these two files back. And I shall also save this project as date extended snippet, like so that I can get back to it quickly and easily. Open up the file and we want this to be 3.8 because this is only going to work in Python 3.8. Interesting. Oh, I created it as an empty file first, huh? That's a fun little bit of business. So this is actually running in that plugin host now. So let's quit that and restart that. So we have a little bit of that information going. So that'll make that a little bit nicer. Yeah. We don't want to get into all of the minutia of splitting this apart too complexly at the moment. But what I will do is boost this up here. Maybe not. Yeah, I don't like that. That makes me sad. Not as sad as this is going to make PEP 8 though. We need a little separator in here. Put that in its own file in just a second. Function, 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 function. Uh-oh. We probably still want that, right? Okay. This respond to a request for completions by checking the scope of the locations. Previously loaded snippet information. Respond to a request for completions by checking the scope of the locations that are provided to our list of previously loaded snippet information. Yeah, good enough. find all of the Sublime snippet files that exist across all known packages. Load them into memory. Caching any that contain the special date field. No tab triggers, or for which there is no date field, are ignored. That's probably cool. The return is a dict that is keyed by scope and whose values are the snippets that apply to those scopes. Always document the thing, you know. Don't always do that though. Okay. Let's change this to I think we want something like that. Load and parse. Oops. Parse it to see if it contains. If it does, then this will then add it to the provided snippet list, keying it by the scope in the snippet menu. And that's really all we need for that. This should probably be something a little bit nicer than this. Whoops. Just so we know what it actually is doing. We got all of that sort of business in there. Trigger a snippet list refresh. I wonder. Python delete all keys from dictionary. D.clear removes every key. Is that a good way? Is that a bad way? Let's say that that's the way. Whoops. We could say snippet list.clear. Then that. Then this gets a snippet list. Everywhere this appears, but not there, becomes that. We don't need to return it anymore because it's not being assigned, and we don't need to do that because we've already passed it. And that comment says what that's actually doing. This should actually not cause an issue because invoking that is already tracked. So we can also trim that back a little bit to make that look a little bit nicer. let's grab this and put this in here. I really should not have done that in that order, huh? Well, I guess that's probably the appropriate way to do that. Okay. So, we can even knock a few of these things out here as well as items. Should probably test and make sure that it still works, huh? Works there, and doesn't work here. Yay! All right. Hello, Akash. Welcome. I guess we don't need to call clear here, do we? Because every time the plugin loads, it's going to be reset there. So that's perfectly fine. I was thinking of something else. We're going to have to swap that into a different situation. At what point do we stop having this stuff all in one file? There's one situation. As it stands, this is not too shabby. vi.get ignore, and let's say we add star.sublime star to that thing. Do we want to exclude the to-do? Probably, huh? Yes, I am using VI inside of Sublime. Git add, git ignore, Python version, and snippet loader. Whoop. Weird. As seen in the July 18th Sublime Text Live, this is the initial code for a prototype package that allows for the creation of snippets that will expand out using let's say that they'll expand out containing the current date and or time. Boom. We just make sure that we have a potential version of this all in. So, one thing that we might want to configure in here is that thing that we were discussing. Whoops. That's not the key that I meant to press, pardon me. I'm going to move that over there. Some of the stuff that we have in the thing for reloading this is one thing, and we want to add some configuration in here as well. For the kind information that we get. One thing that we should do right off the bat is this. S is equal to sublime.load settings. Oh, actually, view.settings.get view. Should be able to just pull it from here. If view.settings.get autocomplete include snippets. Let's say it defaults to what, true? Oh. It's always going to be there. Is equal to false, return none. Respect the global setting that stops snippets from appearing in the auto completion panel. There's a setting for that. So for example, right now, there's a bunch of snippets in here, but if I said view.settings.set, did not mean to do that, and set that to false instead of true, then in theory the snippets aren't supposed to be in there. We might be the only ones that are handling that, or did I do that incorrectly? Oh, I suppose I should probably do that. Boy, I am having a rough night tonight. Okay, there we go. Now there's no snippets in there at all, including ours. But if I commented out these two lines, then ours would still appear in there. So one thing we most definitely want is that, right? You want to make sure. Since the only thing that we're injecting into here is snippets, don't include snippets if the person said don't include snippets. That seems to make the most sense to me. Sublime Text 4 has a new course setting that allows you to block snippets from appearing in the auto completion pop-up. Oh, you know what? I probably should have double checked them now. This simple change makes sure that we respect that setting and don't insert our own snippets in. Sorry, when regular snippets are not supposed to be there. It's kind of the situation at large, right? Now, we could actually even extend this a little bit more, because one of the things that we're seeing here, oh, if I turn that setting back on, is that we get our version of the snippet and we get the other version of the snippet, right? But maybe we want to allow our snippets in even if the other ones aren't there. If somebody wanted something like that, then it would be very easy for us to gate that behind a setting. So we don't need to do that right now. Just need to know that in the exact same way that this checks a setting to see, you know, if this is false, return none. We have our own setting that we check to see, and if it's false, then we do this check, so we can avoid this check from ever happening. That would allow a person to, if they wanted to, create snippets that only contain dates, then block any regular snippets, because there's no way for us to stop snippets from appearing in the list other than the ones that we're inserting in there, that I'm aware of anyway. We can block the contents of Sublime Completions files, but not snippets. So that's one of the things on our list. We should respect the autocomplete include snippets setting. Done. Add snippets to the command palette. Don't want to worry about that. How about this? Oh, actually, taking this in an appropriate order. Class, date, snippet, refresh, cache command, let's say, which is a Sublime plugin dot application command. Refreshing things. There used to be an issue here, so let's check to see. We want that, and we want to say run command, and the command we want to run is that one. So every time the plugin loads, it should say refreshing things like so, including if I quit and restart. Yes. So if that's the case, then we grab this, go like so, run to the command. Refreshing snippet list. So that we're going to leave that in there for the time being. That'll allow us to be able to tell if it's actually running. So every time we do this, it's refreshing the snippet cache the way that we would expect it to. And that also means we need to comment this thing. And say this forces a hard reload of all snippets. This drops the currently cached version of all snippets and reloads them. This is implicitly triggered every time the package loads, but can also be used manually as well as desired, right? And as a part of that, we would say a new commands file, I think. Oh, how far along the road do we want to get on this thing? I guess we probably want that. Yeah. I think that's okay. I don't like the way this is formatted at all, mind you. We'll stick that there. Say new file relative to current view, readme.md. That extends all of the users' Sublime snippet files that contain special key the current date and or time when the snippet expands. Okay, so we'll have a little readme here. Let's also let's move the date extended snippets into the resources thing. I like to keep those sorts of files separate from the rest of the package, essentially. Gonna have to fix it though. Well, maybe we'll actually stick with that as a situation. Date, extended snippets, refresh, snippet, cache. And I guess that's supposed to look like that. I'm gonna put a, no I'm not. It's that, snake cased, which means we should say date extended snippets. I really would have expected that command to be in there, you know. Oh, because that's not the whole command name, is it? No, it's that. Whoops. There we go. Date extended snippets. Open readme works. And refresh snippet cache probably works because when I hit it, we see it going down there. All right. That'll be cool. I guess that also means we need to implement some settings for this thing. So we just have a stub settings file for that thing to go in. And we probably want the same thing here. And get ready for a surprise. Yeah, I'm aware. Save as that to Windows and save as that to OS X. Do we actually need those files? I don't know that we're actually going to have any key bindings that are in here, so probably not, but let's just sort of stick them in there for the time being. We can always tweak that part up later. What else are we missing in here? Now we have our, oh, we don't have the menu file yet. New menu file. And that would be resources, and that would be resources. And that should go into here. So now our little package has a date extended snippets. There's the README, opening the README. There's a settings, opening up the side-by-side settings because there's no settings in there yet, but there will be soon. And there is also a key bindings as well, which is less exciting than it could be because there aren't actually any in there. Maybe we want there to be. That's the first pass at that. let's commit these in a nice little order here. We don't care about... Why is there only one untracked file in here? That's interesting. Is there something magic about these? Oh, yeah, there is. Whoops. There we go. We should probably... Oh, that's a real unfortunate turn of events. That's what that is. Oh well. We can include that as a part of that. So there's a bunch of untracked files that we don't really care about at the moment. And here, instead of invoking refresh snippet cache as a part of plugin loaded, instead, we execute a command to do that, and there's a new command that implements that instead. So we say, delegate full refresh, full snippet refreshes to a... Instead of having the plugin manually refresh the plugin list at load time. Sorry, this implements a command that can do the same thing. Manually refresh the snippet list if they want to. Yeah? Yeah. Boom. All right. That's one thing. Now, here's something else we can do. I'm going to collapse that because we don't really care about any of those files for the time being. If we had something similar to an on post save self view, if view.filename dot ends with dot sublime dash snippet you do this. All right, so what does that actually mean for us here? It means that if I was to save this file, who cares? If I was to save this file, who cares? If I was to save that file, I would care, so I'm not gonna. But if I save this snippet, it refreshes the snippet cache. So if I remove that part of this thing, because we don't actually want it in there, and hit save, then when I expand it out, it's not in there anymore. But if I did something like this, then when the document thing spans out, there it is right in there. So it's automatically refreshing every time the thing starts. So on post save, we just saved a snippet. Let's do the thing. Boom. And reload the snippets manually. We have that. Boom. So when the list of ignored packages changes. That's an interesting thing. We maybe just sort of leave that one for the time being. Basically, what we can do for that one, because we're running very low on time and I need to jump out of here in the next few minutes. We went a lot longer tonight than we normally do for things like this. Sorry. If we look at the help here, in these settings, there's a item called add on change. You give this a textual key that identifies your listener, and every time this settings object changes, you get told about it. And every time, when you're done with it, you have to clear it. The idea behind this is we load the main user preferences and then set up one of these. We keep a track of what packages are currently in the list of ignored packages. Then, every time something gets added to the list of ignored packages or something gets removed from the list of ignored packages, we know that a package has either been just installed or has been disabled or has been re-enabled. And in any case of those cases, there may be snippets inside of that package. So we need to do a refresh on this thing. For sanity's sake, we would need to know exactly what packages that happened for and then check to see if there are any snippets inside of them and only refresh if there are or if there were, which requires us to keep track of the locations of the snippets that we loaded, which is why we're not going to do that right now. But it's definitely something that we can do. So for the purposes of, let's say, having a key binding of some variety. Well, no, not a key, yeah. We might have a key that was Control-Alt-Shift-S. Is that already a command? I don't think so. Control-Alt-Shift-S? No. Control-Alt-Shift-R? Yeah, it is for me, but that's fine. We would include our little command in here, which is this. And comment it out. Use the below key binding as a template if you would like to bind a key to cause the list of loaded snippets to be manually refreshed. Without a key binding using the command palette. Okay, so we have that, and then we just go ahead and put that into this file, and into, whoops, this file. All of our key bindings files have a sample key binding now, which means that since we have resources, we update the git ignore to make sure that we know that they're there. We include a readme because we added that in. We added in a commands file that will allow you to edit the settings that are currently in there but are empty. Why is there two of those? Oh, sorry. One's the settings, one's the key binding, one's the readme, and our little custom command down there at the bottom. Empty settings because we're going to add those in just a minute, and some empty key bindings to use as a stub, and a menu that integrates us in. Include some simple package integrations. By providing a readme sample key binding for all platforms. Should we change the one for Mac OS, do you think? Man, I am not having a good time with the command P-A-L-E-T-T. Whoa. There we go. And boom. All that's left now is what? What did we do in this? Ah, yes. Okay. We'll push this one down. This could be so much smarter, but that's something that can be done later. But imagine that we kept track of what file snippets came from. It would be able to modify a snippet directly in place to know that this is a brand new one, so let's add it, or we can go ahead and remove it, or let's just replace it and maybe the scope changed and it needs to go out of one list and into another or something, you know, those sorts of things. So let's stage that and say detect when snippet changes are being made. That is not how you spell that. This augments the This augments our event listener, right? It does. It augments our event listener so that if the user saves a snippet file, the snippet cache is rebuilt. Changes you make to snippets are... It's weird. My work laptop just automatically rebooted itself. That's exciting. Okay, let's push that down. Cool. Now, shall we add a setting in here, or shall we save that for next stream? I think since it's 11:30, we should save that for the next stream. So basically what we're going to do is clean up this code a little bit here so that we can insert a details or an annotation on the description, but not both. Or maybe both. We can specify whether you want to have an annotated description or an annotated details, and then we could include one or the other if we so chose, right? That's probably... Should we do that now? No, we can't do that now. I must get ready to go to bed. So I think that's where we're going to call this. If people are interested, this is also going to end up on my GitHub page as well. For the time being, however, that is going to do it for tonight's streams. Thanks so much for everybody who hung out while we were working around on some of this stuff here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, although not many people will know because I had an audio issue at the beginning there, so unfortunately I'm going to have to annotate this thing to let people know when the audio actually picked up. Garsh. Tonight is the very last ever Sublime Text Live. Last one that's ever going to happen. And that's because I'm changing the name of the series. So starting next week, there will be a whole new playlist. The stream is still going to happen at the exact same time. You can still find it in the exact same way. It's still going to be about the same stuff. It's just going to have a different name and be in a different playlist and have a different description. And I went over this originally, but it has a lot, when I was having audio problems and not actually making any noise, it has a lot to do with how it upsets my delicate sensibilities that there are currently 129 videos in the playlist for Sublime Text Live. Some of them done on one channel, some of them done on another channel, and all of them have descriptions that are the same and don't tell you what's actually happening inside that particular live stream. I would rather have that be more informative on what was actually worked on, because people routinely ask a question and I can be like, we did that in a live stream, and they'll say, which one? And I'll say, I don't know, because all of them have the exact same description. So we're going to try to fix that going forward, and so as to not drive myself into a frenzy, I'm not going to try to watch what would ostensibly be 500 hours of live stream recordings to figure out what I did in all of them to update the descriptions. So I'm just going to have a clean break. It's also going to be continuing on in the channel category that we're in tonight, which is science and technology, instead of the how-to and self-help or whatever it was in before. Which I should maybe also change the classification of videos on my channel as well. I didn't realize that there was a new science and technology type situation. I don't know. I'm going to investigate that too, because that's how I was used to streaming on Twitch. In any case, thanks to everybody who was watching. We're going to continue on with this package next week, I think. Maybe we'll also work on Override Audit as well. But this is a fun, interesting little tweak that adds some desired features to Sublime Text. There's probably at least one person out there that might find this sort of thing interesting. So we're going to continue on with that. And of course, if you follow me on Twitch, then I'm going to be streaming on Wednesday and Friday as well, doing more work on our ruinous pile of crap. And if you're a member of my Twitch channel, then you're going to know what that project's about. And if not, get thee there. There should be a link down in the description. Until either of those streams, I hope you have a fantastic week whenever it is that I see you next. Remember that this VOD will be unlisted as soon as the stream is over, but it will be in the playlist, and it's going to be the last one in that particular playlist. With that, I thank you all, and including Axel for hanging out. Thanks so much for everybody. We will see you in the next one. Until then, please have a sublime week. Cheesy as all get out. Oh yeah.